It's the International Soccer Preview, and we are Soccerphiles Canada. Welcome to Series 28, looking at the groups and teams of the 2024 Copa America. This episode is looking at the players of Argentina. Here we go! Hello and welcome to the International Soccer Preview by Soccerphiles Canada. I'm Kevin, and this is Series 28 on the players of the 2024 Copa America. This episode covers Argentina's players. We're doing this mediacast in two parts. Part one here is a look at the candidates for the squad and their likelihood of making it. We examine the participation of players in games over the recent period, and we take a couple of factors besides that into account to categorize them into six levels of likelihood, beginning with definite, likely, possible, and so on. In part two, that'll come out when the squad lists are released and the final squad is selected. At that time, we'll go back over the list that we create here and see who made it and who didn't. And we'll also cover a couple of other things like injuries and surprise selections. So this episode will have three sections. In section one, we look at some general information on the team. Section 2 is the main part where we cover the candidates in each position and their likelihood of making it. And in Section 3, we summarize and have some concluding business. So let's begin then with Section 1, some general information on the team. And well, we usually begin with retirement, so players who are off the squad, but we don't really have any major players for Argentina in this section. So we move on to our next order of business, club affiliation. So just to give a sense of who Argentina's players play for at the club level. Argentina players tend to move over to Europe when they're big enough. They make a lot more money in Europe. And so we see most of the national team players playing in Europe. There are a couple in Argentina or in Brazil, but most of them are in the top 5 leagues. Primarily Italy, because they have kind of a relationship, a historical relationship with Italy, but also England and Spain, and then to a lesser degree France and Germany. So let's look at some of the major players, and those will be either top teams in those countries or at least in the first division in those countries. We have Julian Alvarez playing for Manchester City in England, and several players in England. Christian Romero with Tottenham, and some of the lesser clubs too, like Bournemouth and Brighton. For Italy, we have the major clubs represented. Juventus, we have Lautaro Martinez, not so much a starter for Argentina, but he's with Inter Milan, and Nicolas Gonzalez with Fiorentina. And then some top clubs in Spain as well. Atletico Madrid has several players for Argentina. Lionel Messi, probably their biggest name, well, no doubt their biggest name, plays for Inter Miami in USA, but that's kind of a retirement team for him. We also have a couple of other players actually in the USA there, but they're lesser players on the team. And I should have mentioned Portugal because we have a couple of players with Benfica, Nicolas Otamendi and Angel Di Maria, two of their bigger players. Okay, that hopefully gives a sense of their club affiliations without going into too much detail. Let's move on to recent games. And we're examining the participation, I should say, of players from the period after the World Cup. So basically from the beginning of 2023 to now, to March of 2024. So Argentina played 12 games over that period, but we'll also be looking at the positions of players in their World Cup. And speaking of which, international tournaments, well, Argentina is a part of um, every international tournament that Argentina is available to play in. And of course, they played in the 2021 Copa America and the 2022 World Cup. And we're going to kind of narrow our focus in terms of the history to talking about those two tournaments, and really just one or two of the club teams they've played for recently. However, if you want a bit of a deeper dive into that, you could go back to our preview of players for the 2022 World Cup, where we did go into a bit more detail about that. We just felt it made the media cast a bit too long there, so we've decided to narrow it here. Let's move on to formations. And in the World Cup, Argentina began with a 4-4-2 formation. But after two games, they switched to a 4-3-3 formation. So basically, they used both formations equally in the World Cup. They even tried a 5-3-2 formation. That was the only deviation in the Cup and since. Actually, since it's been much more often the 4-3-3 formation. So only 3 times in 3 of the 12 games did they use a 4-4-2. That was in the third game and in 2 of the last 3 games, the third last and second last games. So keep that in mind as we go through. We have, to summarize, the 4-3-3 formation being used 63% of the time over those 19 games, and the 4-4-2 being used 31% of the time. So basically 2/3 of the time for the 4-3-3 and 1/3 of the time for the 4-4-2. And we just have that one errant 5-3-2 formation, which we won't really keep in mind. Finally, in this section, we look at their upcoming games. So they have a couple of friendlies scheduled. The first one is on June 9th against Ecuador, and the second, June 13th against Guatemala. Both of those games are in the USA, where the Copa America is being held. So kind of warming up both in terms of location and in terms of their squad. And we will be keeping an eye on those things, especially for the positions that seem undecided below. There are actually a couple of injuries that Argentina is going to have to cope with. Okay, let's move on to section 2, the main section where we look at the candidates. And let's begin with the manager. That is Lionel Scaloni. And Scaloni is Argentinian born. He actually played for Argentina just 7 games at the international level. And we don't need to look before him. Sometimes we do kind of the transition to the current manager, but he has been manager of Argentina since 2018. So he led them through the 2019 Copa America and in 2021 also, where they won the tournament after a long drought. And of course, through the 2022 World Cup, which they also won. So very successful period under Lionel Scaloni here. So I very much doubt they'll be thinking of replacing him before the tournament comes around. Let's move on to goalkeepers. And we begin by introducing the main candidates, or we introduce all of the candidates, but we're going to focus on the main candidates in terms of biographies. So we have definite candidate Emiliano Martinez. Likely candidates Emiliano Martinez, I didn't put in the graphics there. 2 likely candidates in Franco Armani and in Walter Benitez. And 2 possible but unlikely candidates in Juan Musso and in Geronimo Rulli. So we usually deal with these kind of less possible candidates on the fly here. So Juan Musso was actually off the team for a while and returned after a 15-month absence in September 2023. And played, there were 7 games remaining at that point. He was on the team for 3 of them and then not selected for 4 others, including the last 2 matches. So not completely off the squad there, but we think it's unlikely for reasons that will become more clear when we summarize the position. Geronimo Rulli, also not completely off the team. He was on the bench for the first 4 of their games, and then he was injured for 4 games and not selected for the last 2 matches there. So Geronimo Rulli was actually a backup keeper in the 2022 World Cup, but seems to have drifted off the team here again. And excuse me a second. Not out of the question that they'll be selected, but we consider it unlikely. Let's look at the main candidates, beginning with Emiliano Martinez. He is 31 years old and has been with Argentina since 2019, 37 caps and no goals, and plays for Aston Villa in England since 2020. Was with Arsenal for 8 years before that, but loaned out to a lot of clubs by Arsenal. He has been the starter in the last 2 tournaments and has since started 11 of their 12 games since the 2022 World Cup, and he was on the bench for the last match only. Okay, wow. So Emiliano Martinez looking clearly the starter here. Franco Armani, the first of our substitutes, is 37 years old, been with the national team since 2018 with 19 caps. And he is one of the few players playing in Argentina with River Plate since 2018. He's been part of squad since the 2018 World Cup. And in the 2022 World Cup, he was... Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong thing here. He was on the bench, but selected as a backup keeper. And on the bench, too, for all of the 12 games, or most of the 12 games since the 2022 World Cup, he did sub in to the second half of a game and was on the bench for 9 matches. I think that's 8 matches, and not selected for 2 others. So regularly on the bench there, but tough to get on the field for him. Okay, third or our second likely candidate is Walter Benitez. He's 31 years old and new to the team. He first appeared on the bench in June of 2023 and was on the bench for 6 games and not selected for 3 games, but he was the one who started the last game when Martinez was on the bench. So Walter Benitez plays for PSV Eindhoven in the Netherlands and looks to be making a bid as not only for the squad, but as the backup keeper. But it'll be interesting to look at the June games there to see if he is selected, because Musso and Rulli have not been off the team that long. But starting that last game definitely looks positive. Let's summarize the position, where I'm basically going to repeat that. Things are quite clear here. Martinez, the starter in all games of the Cup, and all but 1 game since then. And it was Walter Benitez starting the last game, suggesting that he is now the first backup. But that is open to question. Okay, well, let's move on to the defense and central defenders. So we have 2 definite candidates, Christian Romero and Nicolas Otamendi. We have 1 likely candidate in German Pazella and a possible candidate in Lisandro Martinez, and another one in Nicolas Valentini, a possible candidate. We do have a couple of players who are possible but unlikely, so we'll deal with them here. Lucas Quarta Martinez returned to the national team after a 19-month absence in October 2023. And of the remaining 6 games, he was subbed in for 1, on the bench for 1, and then not selected for the last 4 matches. So kind of got a quick look back in, but it looks like he wasn't favoured. We also have Marco Senesi here. Marco Senesi was named to a preliminary squad in March of 2024, just recently, but he reported in as injured. Otherwise, he has only got 1 cap for the national team, and that was a substitute back in June of 2022. His successful season, though, with Bournemouth in England might give him some late consideration here. So Marco Senesi, possible, although it looks unlikely at this point. And then we have 2 players who seem to be off the squad. That is Leonardo Balerdi. He returned after more than 3.5-year absence in June of 2023, and kind of like Martinez Quarta, got a quick look in and then wasn't selected for the last 8 matches. So not looking good for him. The other player who seems to be off the team was never actually on it, Gaston Avila. His name basically has popped up, but as of yet, he doesn't have an appearance even on the bench for the senior team, and is playing for youth squad. So Gaston Avila not looking like he has much of a chance here. Let's go back and look at the main candidates. Christian Romero is 26 years old, and he has been with the national team since 2021 with 30 caps and 3 goals. He plays for Tottenham in England since 2022 and was with Atalanta and Juventus in Italy before that. He started 3 of the 7 games in Copa America 2021, 7 games because it was a 4-game group stage, and then quarterfinals, semifinals, and finals. He started 3 of those games, including the final, and he was a starter in the World Cup, starting all 7 games. So increasingly working his way into the team, and that's evident over the last period where he started 11 of their 12 games and was on the bench for 1 game. So Christian Romero, a definite candidate. Alongside him is Nicolas Otamendi. He's 36 years old, with Argentina since 2009, so a real veteran with 111 caps and 6 goals. He's playing for Benfica in Portugal since 2020 and was with Manchester City for 5 years before that. So has been on tournaments since 2010. He actually did miss a couple of tournaments in there, but he was a starter in both the Copa America 2021 and in the World Cup in 2022. He has since started 10 of their 12 games, subbed in for 1 and not selected for just 1. So Nicolas Otamendi, a definite candidate. So really 4-4-2 or 4-3-3, there's just 2 central defenders. So given the Romero and Otamendi are consistent starters, we see German Pazzella having a tough time getting into the team. So really, he is always selected, but doesn't get that many starts. German Pazzella is 32 years old. He's been with Argentina since 2017 and has 40 caps and 3 goals. And he's currently in his 2nd stint with Real Betis in Spain. Really, he was with them since 2015. But for 3 years there, he was with Fiorentina in Italy between his 2 stints. Over the past couple of tournaments, he was a substitute in the 2021 Copa America and in the World Cup in 2022. Since then, he started 3 of their 12 games, subbed in for 3, but was on the bench for all other games there. So consistently selected, as I said. German Pazzella then a likely candidate. Lisandro Martinez is a bit of an interesting story. He is 26 years old and been with the national team since 2019 and has 16 caps. And he is with Manchester United in England since 2022 and with Ajax in the Netherlands before that. Selected for both of the tournaments prior prior to now, and a substitute in both of those. However, he last appeared for the national side way back in March 2023, so more than a year ago. However, much of that time he has been injured, struggled with injury all season, but in the final weeks came back into play for his club, and so is a possible candidate to be called back up after that year absence from the team. So we normally would say unlikely, but we think there is a possibility that he will be called back in. And so we put Lisandro Martinez at the possible level. Also at the possible level, newcomer Nicholas Valentini. He's 23 years old, and his first and only appearance was on the bench in March 2024. So making an appearance there. He plays for Boca Juniors in Argentina, but doesn't have any caps for the national team. Okay, let's look at the situation there. In the Cup, it was Otamendi and Romero as the main pairing. Lisandro Martinez came in to replace Romero one time, and then in that formation where it was a 5-3-2, that means a three-man central defense, and Lisandro Martinez joined Otamendi and Romero there. After the Cup, it continued to be that pairing of Otamendi and Romero. Pezzella came in twice, replacing each of those players once, and then interestingly left back Tagliafico replaced Otamendi once near the end. Okay, let's move on to left backs, where we meet the player we just mentioned, Nicholas Tagliafico, and he is a definite candidate. And we also have Marcos Acuna just as a possible candidate here, and another possible candidate in Valentin Barco. And we have a possible but unlikely candidate in Facundo Medina. And he actually is coded as a central defender. We moved him because his only start was as a left back. He started one of their games in this period. He was on the bench for 4 others, but not selected for the last 6 matches. So that's why we have him as possible but unlikely. Let's go back and look at the main candidates here. Nicholas Tagliafico is 31 years old and has been with the national team since 2017, 57 caps and 1 goal. And he plays for Lyon in France since 2022 and was with Ajax in the Netherlands before that. He was a starter in both the 2021 Copa America and the World Cup in 2022. However, in both cases, he started only about half of the games. Since the World Cup, he started 8 of their 12 games, subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 3 others. So always called up, and we consider him a definite candidate. Marcos Acuna is the possible candidate. He's 32 years old, and since 2016 has 56 caps and 0 goals for the national team. He's with Sevilla in Spain since 2020 and has been part of the last 2 tournaments, starting half the games in the 2021 Copa America, and yes, also half the games in the World Cup. So basically, he and Tagliafico have been trading off as starters, but we'll summarize that situation shortly. Over this period, though, Marcos Acuna has only started 3 of the 12 games. He was subbed in for 4. But the key detail is that he was not selected for the last two matches, so that always puts a bit of a question mark on the player and probably caused us to lower him one notch here. Let's look at the last candidate, Valentin Barco. So he got his first cap in March of 2024. He was a substitute in one of the games and on the bench for the other. So he's just 19 years old, Valentin Barco, and perhaps a candidate here, especially because they really don't have many central defenders and will need some backup if one of the two main players gets injured. Okay, so let's look at. Sorry, I was thinking more of central defense there, but the case might be true because we did see Tagliafico kind of stepping into that role. So it seems generally they need more central defenders, but also may need more backup in this position. Let's look at the summary of the position. So Tagliafico started in the Cup, in the World Cup, but then lost his starting position to Acuna. However, he did return for the last two games, so he played in the semi-final and final. It was mostly Tagliafico in the period after the World Cup until and including the last game. However, Acuna did replace him twice near the beginning and once near the end. We also saw, though, that the central defender Medino replaced him once. And in the 5-3-2, sorry, it wasn't the 5-3-2. When Tagliafico played as a central defender, it was oddly the right winger Nicolas Gonzalez coming in as the left defender. So that was very odd to see. But unsurprisingly, that was an experimental friendly with El Salvador when that happened. Nicolas Gonzalez, of course, an attacking player, and actually has been more on the left side over this period, which we'll talk about later. Okay, so Nicolas Tagliafico becoming more dominant in the position. Right backs, we begin with a candidate at the definite level, and that is Nahuel Molina. But the backups will be important to keep an eye on him because Nahuel Molina is injured. We have two possible candidates then in Gonzalo Montiel and Nehuan Perez, who's actually coded as a central defender, but we put him here because his only start was as a right back. We also have Juan Foyth, who I'll kind of add to the discussion. We have him as a possible but unlikely candidate, but his chances improve given that Molina is injured. Nahuel Molina, then otherwise a definite candidate, is 26 years old and has been with the national team since 2021 with 37 caps and 1 goal. Molina plays for Atletico Madrid in Spain since 2022. He was a sub in the 2021 Copa America, but a starter in the 2022 World Cup, and has started 9 of their 12 games since the World Cup and always selected. However, he is out with a muscle injury since mid-May and has an unknown return date right now. So given that they've been very dependent on him since the start of the World Cup, that would be a big loss for them. And, you know, we look here at the candidates with an eye to who will replace him. It could be our possible candidate, Gonzalo Montiel. He's 27 years old, been with the national team since 2019 with 24 caps and 1 goal. And he's been on the roster of Sevilla for Spain since 2021, but on loan to Nottingham Forest in England since 2023. He was a starter in the Copa America 2021, although just started half of the games there. And in World Cup 2022, he was a substitute, although he did start 1 game. Gonzalo Montiel started 2 of their 12 games then since the 2022 World Cup. He was on the bench for 6, but not selected for 4 matches, including the last 2. So again, that's never a good sign. Gonzalo Montiel then a possible candidate. Also possible, Nehuen Perez, as we said, a central defender who we've moved for the sake of this discussion. Perez is 23 years old and has been with the team since 2022 with 2 caps and no goals. He plays for Udinese in Spain and was with Atletico Madrid prior to 2022. So Perez returned after an 18-month absence in March 2024 to start one of their 2 remaining games and was on the bench for 1 other. So, it seems like he came in and kind of took Montiel's place on the bench there. So that sets up kind of an interesting question as to which of those is higher in the pecking order. Juan Foyth may be in that discussion. Juan Foyth is just a possible but unlikely candidate, so we won't go into detail on his history. But he didn't start any of the 12 games since the World Cup, but he was subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 2. But then he was out on 2 separate occasions with a shoulder injury, and that includes the last 2 matches. So I checked into his shoulder injury. That prevented him from playing for his club from January. But there, just at the end of the season, he seemed free from the injury, but was just listed as not selected for his squad. So my presumption is that he is still kind of working on his fitness. So he may not be recovered enough from the injury to be a candidate here. But Juan Foyth, not completely out of the question. Okay, let's summarize the position then. Very dependent on Molina. He was a starter in all 7 games of the Cup, except for game 2 where Montiel started. And then Molina started 9 of the 12 games since, Montiel replacing him twice and central defender Perez once. However, Molina now out with a muscle injury and a doubt for the tournament, which will throw things up in the air a little bit. Okay, that is the defense. We move on to the midfield now and defensive midfielders. And lo and behold, but Argentina does not have any candidates as defensive midfielders. Perhaps a bit of a chicken and egg argument here, but maybe that's why they always go with a 3 lines on the field, either the 4-4-3 or the 4-4-2. But we are not seeing anything like, say, a 4-2-3-1 or something for Argentina. And it may be because they have no central defenders, defensive midfielders, or it may be that the fact that they use formations like that has them not looking for central or for defensive midfielders. Anyway, enough of that. Let's move on and talk about central midfielders. So we're actually going to divide this up a little more than we do for most teams because of the 4-4-3 formation. The 4-3-3 formation. Instead of viewing that middle line as 3 central midfielders, we view it as 1 central midfielder with a left and a right midfielder. So we'll be talking about those positions, in fact, kind of moving players to those positions depending on where they line up. In the 4-4-2 formation, there are 2 central midfielders, and we see they use that about a third of the time. Let's look at the candidates, though. For central midfield, we have Enzo Fernandez as a definite candidate. Alexis McAllister is coded as a central midfielder, but because he plays on the left, we will move him there and talk about him there. Leandro Paredes is also a definite candidate. And we have Guido Rodriguez as a likely candidate, and Ezequiel Palacios as a possible candidate. We also have Giovanni Lo Celso, who we've moved and we'll talk about later. Let's look at these candidates then. Enzo Fernandez plays for Chelsea in England and was a substitute in the World Cup for games 1 and 2. Then he gained a starting position for the remaining 5 games and ended up being voted best young player of the tournament. So a great tournament for him, and it gave him a starting position since on Argentina, because he has started 11 of their 12 games since the World Cup and was on the bench for the other. However, he was out for groin surgery since late April, but he is due back on May 31st. So another player that they're highly dependent on getting an injury, and they'll definitely hope for his return. We'll have to update that in part 2 of the mediacast. Okay, that is Enzo Fernandez. And we move on to Leandro Paredes. Although he's a definite candidate, he's not really a starter. He has been in the past, as you'll see in his bio here. He's 29 years old and has been with the team since 2017. And his 60 caps and 5 goals suggest that he has been a starter. He was with Roma, or he is with Roma in Italy, his second stint with them since 2023, and was with Paris Saint-Germain before that. And he was a starter for half of the games in Copa America 2021 and started 2 games in the World Cup there. And since the World Cup, he has started 2 of their 12 games, has Leandro Paredes, and started 2 and subbed in for 7 and on the bench for 3 others. So always called up to the squad, though Enzo Fernandez seems to have taken the starts that are available. Okay, so that is Leandro Paredes, a definite candidate. We move on to our likely candidate, Guido Rodriguez, also not a starter. In fact, he hasn't started any games, but he is always selected. He's 30 years old, Guido Rodriguez, and has been with the national team since 2017 with 29 caps and 1 goal. And he plays for Real Betis in Spain since 2020. He was with a couple of clubs in Mexico before that. Over the past 2 tournaments, he has been selected. He started a few games in the 2021 Copa America. Didn't begin as a starter, though, and nor did he in the World Cup 2022, where he was actually just a substitute. So Guido Rodriguez didn't start any games over the recent period, but he was subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 10 others. So always selected and thus a likely candidate. Okay, our possible candidate is Ezequiel Palacios. He's 25 years old and has been with the national team since 2018 with 28 caps and no goals. He was a substitute in Copa America 2021 and also in the World Cup in 2022, but selected for both. And over the recent period, he started 1 of their 12 games, subbed in for 4 and on the bench for 4. He did miss the last 2 matches there. So again, that puts a question mark on a player. So that is it for candidates. Let's summarize the position. And I've talked about the 4-3-3 and the 4-4-2 formation. They did start with the 4-4-2 in the Cup and then changed. So in that start, there were two central midfielders, and that was Paredes and De Paul, who will meet as a right midfielder shortly. Paredes actually dropped out from starting, although he did return for game 6. Meanwhile, De Paul joined a 3-man midfield with Enzo Fernandez in the center, McAllister on the left, and DePaul on the right. But here we'll focus on the central player, who was Enzo Fernandez. That situation continued through most of the games after. There was a little bit of switching around, which we'll talk about later, but Enzo Fernandez primarily in the center. Leandro Paredes did come back in to start 2 games, and one of them was towards the end, one of the few games where they went back to a 4-4-2 formation, so there were 2 central midfielders. So he is still capable of, or still a possibility as a starter. Okay, so Enzo Fernandez, currently the main man there, but his injury may bring that into question, but Paredes a competent backup there, so not too much to worry about. Okay, now, as we said, we are going to divide players into left midfielders and right midfielders, and that required us to recode, in a sense, the players here. So Alexis McAllister, our definite candidate, is coded as a central midfielder, but we have him as a left midfielder. Giovanni Lo Celso, we will discuss here, but in fact, we'll see he is both a left and right midfielder. We have him as a likely candidate here, and that's all we have. Angel Di Maria is coded as a left midfielder, but we're moving him upfield to when we talk about left-sided attackers. So let's look at the candidates. Alexis McAllister is 25 years old and has been with Argentina since 2019 with 25 caps and 2 goals. And he's currently playing for Liverpool in England since 2023 and was with Brighton in England before that for 4 years. Not selected for the 2021 Copa America, but started on the bench in World Cup 2022 and quickly gained the starting position and became an important player on the squad. As we can see by his participation since, he started 10 of their 12 games since the World Cup and was a sub for 1 and on the bench for 1. So Alexis McAllister, an important player as a left midfielder here. Giovanni Lo Celso is 28 years old with the national team since 2017. He has 50 caps and 3 goals and plays for Tottenham in England since 2020. He was a starter in the Copa America, didn't start all the games there in 2021. However, by the time the World Cup came around, I believe he was playing less for them. Anyway, he was injured for that tournament, so not available for selection. And he returned after his World Cup injury in March 2023 and started 5 of their remaining 12 games, subbed in for 4, injured for 1 and on the bench for 2. So always selected Giovanni Lo Celso. He is coded as a central midfielder, but we have moved him here, and the summary of the position that I'm about to say will make it clear. So in the 3rd game of the World Cup, they started using a 4-3-3 formation, which required this position of left midfielder. McAllister, though coded as a central midfielder, played the role, and he continued to do so after the Cup, replaced by Lo Celso when he was missing. Now, we did say earlier there was some switching in the midfield. Sometimes McAllister and Enzo Fernandez switch positions. That happened 3 times over the 12 games. When it was a 4-4-2 formation, McAllister or his replacement Lo Celso played as a left winger. Okay, let's move over to the right midfield. This is going to be easy because we just have one candidate who is a definite candidate, and we've mentioned him before. Rodrigo de Paul, we've mentioned him as playing as a central midfielder when it's a 4-4-2 formation, not all the time, but at the beginning of the World Cup. So Rodrigo de Paul, a definite candidate, is 29 years old and has been with Argentina since 2018. With 62 caps and 2 goals. And he plays at Atletico Madrid in Spain since 2021 and was with Udinese in Italy for 5 years before that. Over the past 2 cups, he has started most of the games in the Copa America 2021, 5 of the 7 games there, and all 7 games in the World Cup in 2022. Since then, he's started 9 of their 12 games, subbing in for 2 and on the bench for 1. So always selected and a definite candidate here. Let's summarize the position. So as we said, he started out as a central midfielder in the 4-4-2 formation. When it went to the 4-3-3 formation, which they've mostly used since, he is the sole occupier of this right midfield position. No, he's not. Hang on a second. He is the main man as the right midfielder. In the Cup, he also played, as we said, as a central midfielder and also as a right winger in the 4-4-2 formation. So he continued to do exactly that in the 12 games after. And as on the left side, Lo Celso was the replacement on the right side here, so replaced De Paul a couple of times. Okay, so that is the defensive end of midfield. Now we move on to the attacking end of midfield, and we've kind of reorganized this position into what I call an attacking midfielder role. So think in terms of the upper left quadrant of the field, and this could be a left winger sometimes, although for Argentina it's not, because McAllister plays the role. It could be a left attacking midfielder, but it's not for Argentina. For Argentina in the 4-3-3 formation, it is the left forward. So when there are 3 forwards, we consider it more of an attacking, a left attacking player is what we call. I said we called it attacking midfielders. We don't. We call it left attacking and right attacking. Anyway, let's look at the candidates here. Firstly, we have Nicolas Gonzalez. He's a bit hard to pin down, Nicolas Gonzalez. Initially coded as a right midfielder, but he's been as a right winger and sometimes coded as a forward. He's been on the left side, at least in the period that we're talking about. Nevertheless, he's a definite candidate, and we'll talk about his positioning. The next players are coded as left wingers. Alejandro Garnacho, he's a possible candidate. Also possible, Lucas Ocampos. And then seemingly off the squad, Papu Gomez. And I'll deal with him right away here. He last appeared for the national team in the 2022 World Cup. He was on the bench in the last game that he appeared for them with. So Papu Gomez not likely to be seen here. Let's look at the ones who are likely, and Nicolas Gonzalez, a definite candidate, is 26 years old, been with the national team since 2019 with 32 caps and 5 goals, and he's played for Fiorentina in Italy since 2021, with Stuttgart in Germany before that. He started half the games in Copa America 2021, but he, after being selected for the final squad for the 2022 World Cup, had to withdraw due to injury. Since the World Cup, he returned from his injury in March 2023 and started 9 games and subbed in for the other 2. So a definite starter at this point is Nicolas Gonzalez. Next, we have Alejandro Garnacho, and he is just 19 years old and has been with the national team since 2023 with 5 caps and no goals. He was actually born in Spain and is with Manchester United in England since 2022. Um, he hasn't been selected. He wasn't selected for the World Cup there. He was actually on the preliminary squad, but didn't make the final cut. And he got his first cap in June 2023 and started one of their, I believe it was 12 games after his first cap. He was subbed in for 4 games, on the bench for 3, and not selected for 2 others. So that adds up to 10, but I actually think it's, I think my math is a bit off there. Anyway, that's um, at least close to being right. Alejandro Garnacho, then, a possible candidate for the team here. Lucas Ocampos, probably less likely than Garnacho. He has 12 caps for the national team since 2019 and 2 goals. He plays for Sevilla in Spain. And he returned Ocampos after a 15-month absence in June of 2023 and was subbed in for 2 games and on the bench for 3. But he was not selected for 5 matches, and that includes the last 2. So almost unlikely here, but Lucas Ocampos will keep as a possible candidate. So those are the candidates for this left attacking position, and we've talked about the what the left attacking position means. And what we said for the left side will be true on the right side. Let's look at who has occupied the position, though. Papu Gomez appeared twice in the Cup, and Julian Alvarez, who will meet as a forward, was also there. Angel Di Maria, who will treat as an attacking midfielder later on, started there in the final game. So various players occupied it during the Cup, but not Nicolas Gonzalez. Di Maria and forward Julian Alvarez both appeared there once after the Cup, but it was Nicolas Gonzalez who came into and predominated the position. However, he didn't start the last 3 games there. In two of the 3 games, the position was not used, and in the final game, it was Garnacho playing in this left attacking role. Okay, so that is the left attacking position over the recent period. Let's move over to right attackers, and here we're placing Lionel Messi, who is primarily coded as a forward, but we all know he kind of moves around a bit up front. So Lionel Messi is the captain and is a definite candidate. We'll come back to him. Actually, we'll come back to him shortly, because the only other candidate we have here seems to be off the squad. It's Luca Romero, and he hasn't appeared for the national team since appearing on the preliminary squad in the 2022 World Cup. So the Mexican-born Romero seems to be out of the picture now. So that leaves us with just Messi as the at least as the candidate here, although we do see other players popping into and out of the position. Let's just do a quick bio on Messi. So he's now 36 years old. He's been with Argentina since 2005, and a whopping 180 caps and an equally impressive 106 goals. Wow. He was with Barcelona in Spain for a long time, from 2004 to 2021, and then moved to Paris Saint-Germain for a couple of years, and is now playing what most consider retirement soccer for Inter Miami in the USA. Well, we could spend 20 minutes going through his history, but we'll just brief over the last 2 cups. Of course, the captain and starter in both of the last, and considered to have led the team to glory by winning the title in both of those cups. Over the past while, Messi has started 7 of their 12 games. He was subbed in for 1, out with 2 separate injuries, including the last 2 matches, although he has since recovered, and then 1 match that he wasn't selected for. So Lionel Messi, a definite candidate here, and obviously trying to make it to the 2026 World Cup, which is expected to be his last tournament, and a definite candidate. Let's summarize the position. In the World Cup, Di Maria, who's kind of floats around quite a bit, Di Maria played the position 3 times in the Cup. Twice as a right winger in the 4-4-2 formation, and then once as a right forward in the 4-3-3. Alvarez and Messi also appeared in this position once each. Because, as we'll see, the players switch around quite a bit up front. After the Cup, though, it was primarily Messi in this position. Di Maria did start here twice, and Nicolas Gonzalez came over to start here once. And the only other candidate here was Buonanotte. Sorry, I'm struggling with the name. Buonanotte, he's coded as an attacking midfielder and got 1 start on this side. But as we said, primarily Messi occupying the position over the recent period. Now we'll move on to central attacking midfielders. And if you think about it, this position doesn't exist either in the 4-3-3 or in the 4-4-2 formation. But we're putting Angel Di Maria here just to organize the discussion a bit, because he does play on both sides. So actually never centrally, but there we have it. We have Angel Di Maria as a likely candidate. We also have a few possible candidates, so obviously they'll be playing in other positions, but the first one is Thiago Almeida as a possible candidate. Valentin Carboni also, and we mentioned Facundo Buonanotte just a while ago. We also have Angel Correa, who is possible but unlikely. He was selected for the last 2 tournaments, and over the past, but since the 2022 World Cup, he has only been a sub in 1 game and on the bench for 3 games, and not selected for 8, including the last 3 matches. So Angel Correa kind of working his way out of the squad, it seems. Let's go back and look at the other candidates. Angel Di Maria is 36 years old and has been with the national team since 2008 with 138 caps and 30 goals. He's currently with Benfica in Portugal since 2023, and with Juventus and Paris Saint-Germain before that. Actually, 7 years he was with Paris Saint-Germain. Selected for all the tournaments over this past 10 years. I'm trying to summarize, but I feel the need to be accurate. Since the 2010 World Cup, was a sub in the Copa America in 2021, but actually started 4 of the 7 games in the World Cup in 2022. And since then, he has started 5 of their 12 games. He subbed in for 4, was injured for 2, and not selected for 1. So another player who seemed a little bit tired, as I said about Otamendi when he was playing in England, seemed a little bit tired and looked like he was aging out. And then in the past couple of years, found refreshment and looked fresh again, and have been making the national team ever since. So Angel Di Maria, a likely candidate at 36 years old here. The other candidates, the first of three possible candidates, Thiago Almeida, was selected for the World Cup in 2020. I won't go into detail on him because he is out with a calf injury, a calf as in the back of the lower part of his leg, and an unknown return date for Thiago Almeida. So perhaps we'll have some more information when we do part 2 of the mediacast after the final rosters are published. So I'll go on to Valentino Carboni. He's 19 years old and got his first appearance on the bench in March 2024, so just recently, and was subbed in for a game and on the bench for one other. So Valentin Carboni. And finally, Facundo Buonanotte, also 19 years old. And I will move him on the roster ahead because he has started one of their games. He was also subbed in for one, on the bench for one, and on the bench for one, but otherwise not selected. So, yeah, not a lot more likely than Carboni, but he did get a start, so that's something. Okay, but as we said in summary of the position, this position is not used. So any of these players we've introduced would show up in another position, as we saw with Buonanotte, and Angel Di Maria shows up all over the place at the front. So we can see him anywhere. Okay, let's move on to forwards, and we have a definite candidate in Julian Alvarez. He is both coded as a forward and often plays as a forward, although we have seen him in some of the attacking midfield positions. Nicolas Gonzalez is actually coded as a forward, but we've talked about him as a left attacker. We have Lautaro Martinez as a likely candidate, and Paulo Dybala. He is actually possible, but unlikely. He's had several injury problems during the period, but he did play at the end of the season on May 19th. As far as the national team goes, he was selected for the World Cup 2022 squad, just a sub there, and hasn't started any game since, but subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 1. But as I said, out with 3 separate injuries, including the last 2 matches. So as we saw with another player, not being recovered enough from the injury may prevent him. So Paulo Dybala as a possible but unlikely candidate. And then Giovanni Simeone, seemingly off the squad. He did return actually after a 2.5-year absence in March of 2023, where he subbed in for 1 and was on the bench for 2, but then not selected for the last 8 matches. So doesn't look like a candidate here. He's been on the team since 2018 and has never been selected for a tournament. Giovanni Simeone. Let's go back and look at the main candidates then. Julian Alvarez is 24 years old and been with the national team since 2021. 29 caps and 7 goals, and is with Manchester City in England since 2022. He was with River Plate in Argentina prior to that. And he was a substitute in Copa America 2021 and also started as a substitute in the World Cup, but kind of grew in stature there and gained a starting position for the last 5 games, scoring 4 of their 15 goals in the tournament. He has since started 8 of their 12 games and subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 2 others. So increasingly a starter is Julian Alvarez, and a definite candidate to be on the squad here. Our likely candidate is Lautaro Martinez, and he's 26 years old, been with Argentina since 2018 with 56 caps and 22 goals, so a pretty good scoring ratio there. Lautaro Martinez has been with Inter Milan since 2018, and he was part of the squads for the last two tournaments. In the World Cup, he started games 1 and 2, and then lost his starting position to Julian Alvarez there. And that still seems to be the case. He started 4 of their 12 games since the 2022 World Cup, subbed in for 6. And there were 2 matches he was not selected for. So usually selected, but not starting as much. So that'll be an interesting battle in the Cup. Looks like Julian Alvarez has the edge for starters. But in the case of forwards, it's rotated. The position is rotated a bit more than other positions. Let's summarize the position of forward then. It is Messi who is the forward in 5 of the World Cup games, either by himself in the 4-3-3 formation or with a partner in the 4-4-2. That partner, as we saw, was Lautaro Martinez in the first 2 games, and then Julian Alvarez in games 5 and 6. In game 7, Alvarez was the centre forward, and Messi moved out to the right forward or right attacker, and that's where we're seeing him in recent games. So yes, very much that's the case after the Cup. Alvarez as the forward, Messi on the right, and Alvarez is rotated with Lautaro Martinez in the centre forward position, although as we saw, Alvarez plays it more. In the 3 games where it was 2 forwards after the Cup, things really got switched up. But ultimately, it's the same cast of attacking players who we have presented switching around. Gonzalez, Alvarez, Messi, Di Maria, all kind of shifting around. But there was one interesting exception there with left midfielder McAllister playing as a left forward in one of the games. Okay, that is it for the team. And we move on to section 3, closing thoughts. So closing thoughts on Argentina, really a very stable squad, not much need to change after winning the championship. So we see fairly minor changes. I think going into the Cup, now that they've got the monkey of the long drought off their back, they will be relaxed. Winning the Copa America, I think, relaxed them a bit going into the World Cup. And then, of course, winning the World Cup and getting that title for Messi, really what all the angst has been about over the last 10 or 15 years. So it'll be interesting to see them in the Cup, but I think being relaxed will be a good thing. With this steady squad that I guess is going into retirement, some of the main players, although players like Messi, Di Maria, and Otamendi will be trying to make it to the next World Cup and then looking to retirement after that. Okay, let's review the starters. So we'll kind of go through the list quickly here and really limit it to players that we are confident who are going to start. So beginning with the manager, well, he's won 2 tournaments in a row, so we're pretty sure that manager Lionel Scaloni will be starting or will remain their manager going into the Cup. Sorry, I'm just hesitating a bit because I'm finding my place in my notes. Okay, so Scaloni will highlight in green, confident that he's a starter. And Emiliano Martinez, we're also confident that he's a starter. A bit of question as to who the second backup keeper is, but perhaps the friendlies in June will shed some light on that. Defenders, central defenders, Christian Romero and Nicolas Otamendi, a very stable partnership there. Other players just coming in to replace them, but they look kind of unshakable going into this tournament. Nicholas Tagliafico, I am going to nominate him as a starter. He was I wouldn't quite say rotated by Acuna there, but challenged by Acuna for the position. But Marcos Acuna has dropped off. So I'm going to say Nicholas Tagliafico as the starter. Definitely on the right back position, it would be Nahuel Molina. However, an injury doubt throws a spanner into the works there, because he's been so consistently a starter that if he's not there, it leaves a big question mark as to who would replace him. So that'll be interesting to keep an eye on for the June friendlies. It's an unknown return date for him, you'll see when we summarize injuries. So there is a chance of Molina coming back. In defensive midfield, that was kind of sorted out in the World Cup, with Leandro Paredes giving way to Enzo Fernandez as a starter. However, Enzo Fernandez is an injury risk too. He is due back from groin surgery on May 31st, but that doesn't give him a lot of time to warm up in terms of games. Who knows? We're going to say that's a close call. If he is out, though, Leandro Paredes is a ready backup. Left midfielders, Alexis McAllister, we can nominate him as a definite starter, and same on the right. So as I said, this three-man midfield of Enzo Fernandez, McAllister, and DePaul emerging from the World Cup. Attacking midfielders, well, over the past little while, it has been Nicolas Gonzalez. I'm not quite sure I'm ready to say he's a definite starter, because players do rotate quite a bit up top. So I just want to see how many starts he has. 9 of the last 11 games. So I will nominate Nicolas Gonzalez as a starter. As I say, he has been playing on the left, but he's coded as a forward or sometimes as a right winger as well. So we may see him shifting around. On the right attacking side, Lionel Messi will be a starter, not necessarily in that position. It could be as a forward or somewhere in the front lines. We coded Angel Di Maria as a central attacking midfielder. Really, that was just convenience because they don't use that position. But he plays on the left and right. So this is a good place to talk about him. He only started 5 of the 12 games, so we won't nominate him as a starter. In the forward line, Julian Alvarez and Lautaro Martinez did seem to kind of alternate in the position going into the Cup. Now they still alternate to a degree, but Julian Alvarez clearly has the dominance in the position. So just making it into our criteria for definite starters. Maybe we're not as confident that he'll start because Lautaro Martinez could, but we will nominate him anyway. Okay, that's our race through the team starters, and we'll just finish now with a review of injuries. We have right back Nahuel Molina out with an injury since mid-May and an unknown return date. So we put him in the unknown category here. And the other one is Enzo Fernandez. He is expected back on May 31st, but I'm not going to put him back in the expected back category because I think they're a bit hopeful when they say these things. He was out for groin surgery since late April. One of the concerns is that he doesn't have a lot of games to bring himself back to fitness. And, an injury just doesn't go till a certain day and then ends. So I'm going to say that Enzo Fernandez will be a close call, but possibly one that we can update in part 2, maybe even we'll have been able to look at the squads for the friendlies in June and have a sense of whether he is back in action. Okay, so just those 2 injuries, but they are to key players. And we'll finish just by looking at a quick preview of part 2, which we'll release when the squads are known, the final squads are known. And at that time, we'll go over the list that we created here and talk about any notable non-selections, players we expected to be there who aren't, and any surprise inclusions, including new players. And then we can also give some update on injuries. So we hope this look at the squad increases your enjoyment of the cup, and stay tuned for part 2. We would like to thank Paul Udin and Pixabay for the wonderful background music accompanying this mediacast. The piece is called Victory Epic Music.